and welcome to the Quarter House. As you may know, my name is Christopher Houghton-Butt. As an economic historian, I have long been convinced that the fulcrum of modern history continues to be the Treaty of Versailles, signed 100 years ago next week, with the ill-fated consequence that Germany was required to make reparations she could not afford, the details of which were worked on right here in Folkestone. The Treaty of Versailles marked the moment when humanity passed from being embedded in tradition to being able to take charge of its own destiny for the first time. We did so by replacing the tenets of the Ancien Regime with Woodrow Wilson's abstract 14 points. Not unexpectedly, we made a complete hash of it. But now, as the world created a century ago begins to crumble, we have a second chance. The essence of that possibility is to hearken closely once more to the warnings contained in this book, The Economic Consequences of Peace, by Maynard Keynes, published in 1919, and then to take note of Rudolf Steiner's ideas from the same time, published as The World as One Economy, concerning the advent of a single but shared global economy. Two economists who never met, but whose ideas resonate with each other, and whose joint thesis concerning the catastrophic events that would result from Versailles is well described in this third little-known book called Intermission, written by two professors of history. Certain of this thesis, I began playing with the idea of bringing together the three key figures from that time, Keynes, Steiner, and Wilson, to rehearse now what should have happened then. The result is this Playstellation, which first came about in Vancouver in March this year and has continued to evolve here in Folkestone, where tonight you will see its latest version. It's a work in progress, an experiment, a play on a journey. You find it, no, you join it, on the current leg of this journey in its current stage. And part of the idea, part of the improbability of the conversation it portrays, is to ask you to sit in on tonight's iteration, after which there will be an opportunity to explore its very improbability and to ask questions of myself in particular and of the cast. So once again, a very warm welcome to the Quarter House.
On the 8th of January, 1918, the President of the United States of America, Woodrow Wilson, announced to the world via Congress 14 points that, in his mind, would serve as the only possible basis of an enduring peace. High-principled, theoretically and historically naive, he might as well have said nothing, except that his words gave cover for a quite other treatment of world development after 1919. In July and August 1922, Rudolf Steiner gave 14 seminal lectures on economics. In his mind, these two would contribute to peace, although to this day they remain largely unknown and therefore also little heeded. As will be portrayed here this evening, Wilson's abstractions will be met by an ethos instead of a one-world economy, offering an alternative to the chaos of the last 100 years. Wilson's 14 points are verbatim. Steiner's 14 riposts are synopses of his lectures, distilled into matching word counts. Good evening. My name is Maynard Keynes, and this is an Improbable Conversation. I would like to begin by inviting my first guest to join us, the President of the United States of America, Mr. Woodrow Wilson. When, in 1919, I published my book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, I did not write the kindest of things about you. In fact, Mr. President, I said, you left Washington enjoying a prestige and moral influence throughout the world unequaled in history. Your bold and measured words carried to the people of Europe above and beyond the voices of their own politicians. The enemy peoples trusted you to carry out the compacts you had made with them, and the Allied people acknowledged you not as a victor only, but almost as a prophet. With what curiosity, anxiety, and hope we sought a glimpse of the features and bearings of the man of destiny, who, coming from the West, was to bring healing to the wounds of the ancient parent civilization and lay for us the foundations of the future. But no, Mr. President, you were not a hero or a prophet. You were not even a philosopher. You were but a generously intentioned man with many of the qualities and many of the flaws of other human beings, yet lacking that dominating intellectual capacity which would have been necessary to cope with the dangerous and subtle spellbinders who a tremendous clash of forces and personalities had brought to the top as triumphant masters of the swift game of give and take, a game of which you had no experience at all. Mr. President, like Odysseus, you look wiser when seated. Whatever else you may be, your temperament is not that of a student or a scholar. Indeed, you do not have much even of culture. But if you are not a philosopher king, what are you? After all, you are a man who has spent much of your time at university. You are by no means a businessman or an ordinary party politician, but a man of force, personality, and importance. What then is your temperament? The clue once found is illuminating. Mr. President, you are like a nonconformist minister, perhaps a Presbyterian. Your temperament and your thought is essentially theological, not intellectual, with all that manner of thought, feeling, and expression. Next, I would like to invite my second guest, Dr. Rudolf Steiner, whom I've never met, but who in 1922 was a man representative of Central Europe.
Mr. Keynes, Maynard, if I may, in 1920 I said of you that of the many assessments of the current chaotic world situation, one of the most significant was that presented by you in your book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace. Your outer position in life qualified you to make such an assessment. During the war, you were assigned to the British Treasury, upon which experience you built your judgment. In addition, you were one of those drafting the Treaty of Versailles itself. So, you were one of those who saw Woodrow here, whose advent in Versailles from America had been greeted with such glory as a kind of prophet who would restore order to the world. However, you changed your mind completely. While Woodrow here was being hailed by enormous crowds as a liberator of the world, you came to see that his empty and abstract talk and his manifestos could bring nothing that would restore a true rebuilding of our devastated situation. In your book, you vividly and graphically characterize Woodrow's personality. You describe his arrival in Versailles, participation in the negotiations, and the slowness of thinking that made him limp along, 5, 6, or even 10 sentences behind everyone else. It was because you, Maynard, saw that nothing could come of this peace treaty that could lead to a wholesome and beneficial development of European civilization, that you resigned your position at the very beginning of the negotiations. We have good reason to listen to you, because most of the contemporary opinions are based on nationalist or chauvinist or other prejudices. There are only a few people, of whom, Maynard, you are one, whose opinions are dictated by objective facts. You reflected on what would result, particularly for the economy, from the treaty being concocted in Versailles, and you calculated, I use the word expressly, that nothing but the economic ruin of Europe would result from such a treaty, accompanied, of course, by cultural and political disintegration. The contents alone make this book interesting. Its conclusion, however, make it all the more interesting because there you openly admit as to having no idea what to do or plan to get us out of the chaos we find ourselves in. And with this admission, you say something very significant, which I would like to quote. In this autumn of 1919, in which I write, we are at the dead season of our fortunes. The reaction from the exertions, the fears, and the sufferings of the past 5 years is at its height. Our power of feeling or caring beyond the immediate questions of our own material well-being is temporarily eclipsed. The greatest events outside our own direct experience and the most dreadful anticipations cannot move us. We have been moved already beyond endurance and need rest. Never in the lifetime of men now living has the universal element in the soul of man burnt so dimly. For these reasons, the true voice of the new generation has not yet spoken, and silent opinion is not yet formed. To the formation of the general opinion of the future, I dedicate this book. So spoke a man, you, Maynard, who was intimately involved with the circumstances and who was called upon to participate in them.
The three of us have never been in the same room until now. Maybe I can help you to settle your differences, to find some kind of rapprochement, and reset humanity's collective compass. This, of course, is not something we alone can do. We can but speak forth and let history, if not indeed the markets, be our judge, as gods no longer are thought to have that role. And so, my friends, I would like to ask you to speak forthrightly your views, beginning each time with you, Woodrow, followed by you, Rudolf.
Open covenants of peace, openly arrived at, after which there shall be no private international understandings of any kind, but diplomacy shall proceed always frankly and in the public view.
England and Germany arrived differently in the 20th century, with Britain stealing a march via empire and economics. Neither, however, is apt going forward, because neither conceives world economics as shared.
Absolute freedom of navigation upon the seas, outside territorial waters, alike in peace and in war, except as the seas may be closed in whole or in part by international action for the enforcement of international covenants.
In one all of a piece, never-ending process, the values created by labour working on land and capital organising labour are exchanged through prices occurring as moments of rest in the otherwise fluid and moving medium that is economic life.
The removal, so far as possible, of all economic barriers and the establishment of an equality of trade conditions among all the nations consenting to the peace and associating themselves for its maintenance.
Emancipated from religion, distinct from law, at risk of contamination by egotism, even so, a science is emerging predicated on the division of labour, true trade, and a concern for others than ourselves.
Adequate guarantees given and taken that national armaments will be reduced to the lowest point consistent with domestic safety.
Born of division of labour, capital should gravitate to capacities such that money and goods maintain their right relationship.
A free, open-minded and absolutely impartial adjustment of all colonial claims, based upon a strict observance of the principle that in determining all such questions of sovereignty, the interests of the populations concerned must have equal weight with the equitable government whose title is to be determined.
All values produced must be used up, tension and relaxation, potency and kinetics, personal, not real credit. These are our watchwords if capital is not to stagnate in land which has no real value, and skills are not to waste and die, all for want of collaborative thinking.
The evacuation of all Russian territory and such a settlement of all questions affecting Russia will be secure the best and freest cooperation of all other nations of the world in obtaining for her an unhampered and unembarrassed opportunity for the independent determination of her own political development and national insurance, and assure her of a sincere welcome into the society of free nations under institutions of her own choosing. And more than a welcome, assistance also of every kind that she may need and may herself desire. The treatment accorded Russia by her sister nations in the months to come will be the acid test of their goodwill, of their comprehension of her needs as distinguished from their own interests, and of their intelligent and unselfish sympathy.
Not only price, but true price should obtain if economic life would be balanced and in good health. But this is idle speculation if capital, seeking preservation, becomes trapped in land, starving the productive economy of investment and so undermining the production of goods. Or if single rather than differentiated interest rates prevail, preventing a conversation between sectors because we think instead of every dog having its day. Or if excess values are not given to artists, teachers and cultural workers to underwrite new value creation and pure consumption, the latter never a waste but a recycling, never lost but circulated. The one, overvalued land, is the counterpart of the other, undervalued work. The choice, and so the fate, is ours, as are the errors and any regrets.
Belgium, the whole world will agree, must be evacuated and restored, without any attempt to limit the sovereignty which she enjoys in common with all other free nations. No other single act will serve as this will serve to restore confidence among the nations in the laws which they have themselves set and determined for the government of their relationships with one another. Without this healing act, the whole structure and validity of international law is forever impaired.
Rather than land, labour and capital as factors of production, we should think of purchase, loan and gift as factors of price formation. 3 categories, yes, but 3 kinds of economic activity, enabling the opposing economic natures of agriculture and industry to be reconciled. The one making things dearer, the other making things cheaper. But none of this can happen to one side. Economists need to be in the retort, their own behaviour, the focus of their thoughts.
All French territory should be freed and the invaded portions restored, and the wrong done to France by Prussia in 1871 in the matter of Alsace-Lorraine, which has unsettled the peace of the world for nearly 50 years, should be righted, in order that peace may once more be secure in the interest of all.
The idea of supply and demand ought not to be taken one-dimensionally, for then the links between production, distribution, and consumption will be misinterpreted. So too will economics seek its ground in natural science rather than its own logic, with the consequence that we will misread the evolution from barter through monetization to today's capitalizing of capacities.
A readjustment of the frontiers of Italy should be effected along clearly recognisable lines of nationality.
Not to grasp the threefold nature of money means banks and abstract finances take over.
The people of Austria-Hungary, whose place among the nations we wish to see safeguarded and assured, should be accorded the freest opportunity to autonomous development.
When values circulate, profit and loan capital work to ensure that, mutually wise, because shared, judgment and public spiritedness inform our dealings with one another.
Romania, Serbia and Montenegro should be evacuated, occupied territories restored, Serbia accorded free and secure access to the sea, and the relations of several Balkan states to one another determined by friendly counsel along historically established lines of allegiance and nationality, and international guarantees of the political and economic independence and territorial integrity of the several Balkan states should be entered into.
When economics completes its journey from local, pre-17th century, through national, pre-20th century, to world economy, profit, trade and money take on different meanings, no longer separating, but uniting us. The Treaty of Versailles notwithstanding, global economic life requires a cohering rather than competition mindset, to which end the nationalistic thinking of before needs to give way to a cosmopolitan spirit.
The Turkish portion of the present Ottoman Empire should be assured a secure sovereignty, but the other nationalities which are now under Turkish rule should be assured an undoubted security of life and an absolutely unmolested opportunity of autonomous development. And the Dardanelles should be permanently opened as a free passage to the ships and commerce of all nations under international guarantees.
To keep abreast of historical developments, monetary science must embrace the realities of a single global economy. This requires distinguishing between purchase, loan, and gift money, and recognizing that money must die just as the things it represents becomes consumed. Most challengingly, economic life should be entrusted to collaboration by the players and no longer subject to central bank or other intervention.
An independent Polish state should be erected, which should include the territories inhabited by indisputably Polish populations, which should be assured a free and secure access to the sea, and whose political and economic independence and territorial integrity should be guaranteed by international covenant.
Once we learn the economic value and meaning of spiritual life, education, the arts, and culture generally, we will see that its measure is the labour it saves or obviates, cancelling out labour required. The false dichotomy between quantity and quality will then evaporate.
A general association of nations must be formed under specific covenants for the purpose of affording mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to great and small states alike.
Beyond today's false values, money as moving worldwide bookkeeping allows us to give a new ground to economic life, rethinking the role of land and overcoming our focus on gold.
When Dr. Steiner was giving his lectures, I was writing much the same in my next book, which in many ways mirrors the ideas of Dr. Steiner. Strange to say, in this little booklet called Intermission, published in 1941, our views are corroborated. It describes how events after 1919 unfolded, much as I said they would, if Germany was not treated with portion justice. It was not so much the amount required of her, but the vengeance that gave rise to it. The tragic irony is that in the end, Germany paid far less than was required of her, and so the world lost on 2 counts.
One day, Harun al-Rashid read a book wherein the poet said, "Where are the kings, and where are the rest of those who once the world possessed? They're gone, with all their pomp and show. They're gone the way that thou shalt go. O thou who choosest of thy share the world and what the world calls fair, take all that it can give or lend, but know that death is at the end." Harun al-Rashid bowed his head. Tears fell upon the page he read.
Now we have a Q&A session a formal one, an official one, maybe 10 minutes maximum, but if you want to carry on, that's okay by all of us. And I've just been asked to be clear what kind of questions you're asking. And don't ask of our friends here the questions you should be asking of me, and vice versa.